Hi, I'm Owen Canfield with the Oklahoman, joined today by 4th District Congressman Tom Cole, who is in town for a few days. There's a bit of a break in Washington. Tom, thank you for being here today.
Hey, great to be with you.
You know, we thought while we had you in town, we'd talk about some of the things that have been bubbling up nationally. But before we do, I want to just ask you, whenever you're out amongst the people, so to speak, in your home and you have town halls and things, you get a lot of interesting feedback. And I'm wondering what people are most interested in talking about.
Well, they're
right
very
now.
concerned about the country. They really are concerned about the direction that we're moving in. A lot of questions about foreign policy and the economy, and that now has a state undertone too that it did not have a couple of years ago or even a year ago. I mean, oil prices really do impact the district that I represent. They impact the state, obviously.
Sure.
Commodity prices in the rural areas are down too. So a lot of concern about the future of the economy. And then probably the presidential race. I mean, endless questions about that. What do you think? Or suggestions about who it should be. And then just a genuine frustration that more isn't getting done in Washington, D.C. Although when you probe that, you know, the things they want done are things that would be unlikely that President Obama would sign.
Well, you beat me to the punch there. You've talked to that about that with us in the past. That the House, especially, has accomplished moved a fair number of bills forward, and then when you have a president from the other side of the aisle who doesn't agree, they get vetoed. And what ends up, the message comes back, nothing's getting done.
Yeah, and it's frustrating. You know, we put Keystone on the president's desk, he vetoed that. We put the repeal of Obamacare on the president's desk, he vetoed that. We put what's called Waters of the U.S., which is an EPA regulatory overreach, on his desk, he vetoed that. We put a prohibition of any funding to Planned Parenthood, he vetoed that. So obviously the problem isn't the Congress. If you're moving that to the desk, you got to have somebody that'll sign it, as opposed to somebody that will veto it and could sustain that veto.
Sure. You talked about the presidential race. We have the convention, the Republican convention, coming up in July in Cleveland, and all eyes are going to be on Cleveland, of course, because the debate is whether Donald Trump, the front runner, can get to 1237, the number of delegates he needs to become the nominee. It appears that may not happen. In fact, very well may not happen, which opens the door to any who knows what. And I wanted to ask you what you think. What kind of chaos are we in for in Cleveland if that is what transpires?
Well, of course, I agree with you, by the way. This is the best chance for something like that to happen, a multi-ballot contested convention in my lifetime. I think Trump has to win it before he gets there. I think it will be very tough because while he might have a certain number of delegate votes, the delegates themselves are only obligated to vote for him the first time. A lot of those people will actually have allegiances to other candidates. I think, for instance, Ted Cruz, who carried the state, will probably have more delegates in the Oklahoma delegation than he has votes on the very first round. And that may be true of some of the other candidates as well, that Kasich that came on later or whatever.
Right.
But if Trump doesn't win it on the first round, then actually I think Cruz has a very good chance on a second or third ballot to win. Now, if he weren't to nail it down in those two, then I think the door really is open. And at that point, you don't know who would emerge. It really is up to the delegates. I think the important thing right now for Republicans is to, number one, make sure that all the voters understand the process is fair, that people are actually doing what they were supposed to do, that their votes as expressed in the primaries will be reflected in that first round. But that's the way the rules are set up. If you don't win it in the primaries, then it really becomes the delegates' decision.
How tough a sell is that for Republicans? Because Donald Trump has been out there saying, hey, the people want me. I'm their guy.
If the people
the
want
numbers, no, I'm just saying the numbers don't necessarily, he's getting 37, 38 of Republican voters. He hadn't carried 50% yet, but he's making the point that, hey, listen, there's going to be trouble. I can't be held accountable for what might happen.
This is one of those cases where if you compare yourself to Ronald Reagan, you ought to act like Ronald Reagan. In 1968, first time Reagan ran for president, he actually got more votes in the primary than Richard Nixon. Now, that's because California, there were very few primaries. And, well, you never heard him complain about that. And in 1976, when he contested Gerald Ford and came within 100 votes, that's when he got up and gave the great shining city on a hill speech to try and unify the party and project a hopeful vision for the future. So if you care about the Republican Party, you play hard by the rules. You got the delegates that you won, But after that, if you can't put it across the line, and that's what happened with Ronald Reagan, he got the delegates he won. He tried everything he could leading into that convention and at the convention, announcing a vice presidential pick, feeling one. But in the end, he didn't make the sale, and he accepted the outcome and the result. We didn't win the election, but President Ford ran competitively, and it actually opened the door for Ronald Reagan 4 years later because people remembered, hey, here's a guy that plays hard but plays by the rules and is a team player and accepts the outcome. I think it's really critical for Trump to do that, although I do also think that once we get through this process, and we will end up with a nominee, nobody unifies Republicans like Hillary Clinton. And I don't think that people are going to stay home or not vote because whoever comes out of that convention is going to get a lot of support. Republicans will tend to rally together. The real question is, can you reach beyond that and get us conservatives that aren't necessarily aligned with us in a partisan sense?
What about the idea, that we talked before he came on here about Paul Ryan, the Speaker? There's been some talk about, bringing his name into the mix if Trump is not able to win the majority. How likely is that?
Well, I think he'd be one of the names that comes up. Now, everybody talks about this, but Paul Ryan, who's in the uncomfortable position of having to actually preside in the convention. As Speaker, he presides. So, as he said, he's going to be as neutral as Switzerland, and he has been. And I think, again, I still think, Trump is, if he gets it, he'll win it. Nobody's going to take it away from him. If he didn't get it on the first ballot, then I think Cruz would have the next best chance. And if that doesn't happen, there'll be a pretty serious debate. And there'll be a lot of names, including maybe some of the people. Kasich would still be in it at that point. Maybe a person that dropped out early, like a Rick Perry. I could see Texans gathering and conservatives gathering around him. So I think it would be, I've heard Condoleezza Rice. I mean, you hear all kinds of names. But it would be the responsibility of those delegates to make that decision because the Republican primary voters had failed to achieve the goal.
How many conventions will this be for you? You've been in any number of positions.
Since '76. Wow. The first one, I was a college kid volunteering there and just went up for a day and got a gallery pass, so I didn't see a lot of stuff. But beginning as executive director, the state party in 1980 cycle, I've been to every one in one capacity or another. So it's exciting, but I've never seen anything like this leading into it, and there hadn't been anything remotely like this in the Republican side since '48, maybe '52.
Yeah. Switching gears just a little bit, one last topic I want to talk about is Merrick Garland. President Obama's nominee to the Supreme Court. Republicans, I realize this is not a House issue, it's a Senate issue, but it's a Republican issue.
Yeah.
The Republicans in the Senate have said, thank you, but we're not going to even consider him until after the election. Do you agree with that move? And what is the potential downside for Republicans making that stance?
I do agree with that move. Look, this vote will move the Supreme Court either keep it as it is or move it dramatically to the left. And with all due respect, we know what the Democrats would do. They've already changed the rules on judges below the Supreme Court. We have any number of them having been quoted, including the vice president in the past. Well, in election year, we shouldn't be doing this. So for them to be crying foul when they actually threatened to do it in '92 and then again in 2006, 7, and 8, and for this president who tried to filibuster Samuel Alito's nomination to complain, it strikes me as hypocritical. Look, I think being honest and saying the stakes here are too high. The president will have a new president. This will become a presidential issue. Let the American people make the call. I think Mitch McConnell did the right thing. And now, again, if they decide they want to meet with him, I think that's perfectly fine. If they decide they want hearings, it'd be up to them. But why put somebody through that if you know, look, we're not going to make this a decision of this consequence till later? Why go through a charade and be hypocritical? And I think they're actually trying to be, McConnell and the Republican majority in the Senate are trying to be honest with people. The stakes are too high. And I have to tell you, Republican voters would rebel. And they should, because they're not interested. They want to see who the next president is. They think they have a chance to win this, and they don't want to see the court shift. Even when you get past the election, and whoever wins will be thankful to Mitch McConnell, Democrat or Republican. Thank you for preserving my opportunity. the next president would be well advised to try and find a more consensus choice because there'll still be a substantial number of Democratic or Republican senators who can still delay and beat filibusters and cause a lot of problems. So you'd like one of your initial moves as a new president to be something that people on both sides looked at and said, you know, that's pretty fair. That's what I would expect.
What about the argument that you might hear that says, wait, Republicans are really rolling the dice here because if Hillary Clinton, let's say, is the nominee and wins the Democratic, or wins the election in November, whoever she puts forward potentially could be not quite as amenable as a guy like Merrick Garland.
Look, and I don't want to say anything critical of Judge Garland. Everything I hear, he's a very fine man and a very respected judge. On the other hand, the National Rifle Association is already against him. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce has come out against him. So let's not live under the illusion that this is somehow a Justice Kennedy type pick. He is very clearly on the left, and these 4-4 decisions that people point to would all be 5-4 from my standpoint in the wrong direction. So the Republicans would say, why not take the chance? We know what we've got here. And while he might be judicious and thoughtful, he's not going to align with us very often on the issues. And why not let the American people take this into consideration as a factor when they choose the next president? I actually don't think you will be any worse off. I mean, your strength will depend on whether or not you've got the numbers on the other side of the election to still weigh in.
Right.
Now, a new president is always going to get some deference, and there's a little bit of a honeymoon even after a tough election for a new president. But look, these appointments are for a very long time,
sure,
and in this case, change the direction of the court. So I think the Republican majority in the Senate is wise to do what they're doing, and I think they're actually doing everybody a favor by saying, look, we're not going to hold a bunch of charade hearings and drag out the clock and add to the dissolution. We're telling you what we're doing. We're telling you why we're going to do it, and we want to see what happens in the election. Obviously, we'll deal with whoever the new president picks.
Tom Cole, thank you for being here today, and we invite you to follow Congressman Cole out of Washington with our man Chris Castile and here on News OK.